Marcus Kane was having what he generously called a typical Tuesday when he stumbled across the thing that would make him the most simultaneously beloved and feared human in galactic history. And by typical Tuesday, I mean he was elbow deep in the guts of a derelict space station, looking for anything worth more than the fuel it took to get there. Oscar, remind me again why we're crawling through a station that's been dead for 3 cycles, Marcus grunted, wrestling with a particularly stubborn power coupling. His ship's AI, Oscar, responded with the mechanical equivalent of a sigh. Because, Marcus, your definition of profitable salvage includes anything that isn't actively trying to kill us, which, I must point out, is a remarkably low bar. Hey, that low bar has kept us in business for 5 years, Marcus shot back, finally freeing the coupling. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Now, any sentient being with half a brain knows that asking, what's the worst that could happen, is basically sending an engraved invitation to the universe to show you exactly what fresh hell it's been cooking up. But Marcus was human, which meant he operated on a level of optimism that bordered on clinical delusion. That's when he heard it. A sound that made every survival instinct in his body scream, "Run now! Ask questions while running faster!" It was a whimper, soft, pitiful, and coming from something that should not, under any circumstances, be making cute noises. Marcus followed the sound to a maintenance bay where he found what appeared to be a small furry ball of misery. Except this wasn't just any small furry ball of misery, this was a Vorthak cub. Let me explain something about Vortax for those of you who've been living under a rock on a dead planet in an abandoned star system. Vortax are what happens when evolution decides that regular apex predators are for amateurs. They're 8 feet tall when fully grown, have claws that can slice through battle armor like tissue paper, and possess a hunting instinct so refined that most species consider them a natural disaster with teeth. Finding a baby Vorthak should have been Marcus's cue to set a new personal record in the 100-meter sprint. Instead, he knelt down and looked at the tiny creature. "Well, hello there, little guy," he said softly. "Marcus, no!" Oscar's voice crackled through his comm with the urgency of someone watching a friend pet a nuclear bomb. "That is a Vorthak cub, baby, apex, predator. The key word here being predator." But Marcus was already reaching out, and the cub looked up at him with eyes that were far too large for its face. It made another pitiful sound, and Marcus felt his heart do that thing it always did when confronted with something small and helpless. "It's hurt, Oscar. Look at it. It's just a baby." "It's a baby that will grow up to hunt starships for sport," Oscar replied. "This is exactly how horror movies start, Marcus. Concerned human finds abandoned creature, creature grows up, creature eats concerned human and everyone he's ever met." Marcus gently scooped up the cub, which immediately curled into his arms like it belonged there. "Yeah, well, that's a problem for future Marcus. Present Marcus just found a baby that needs help. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Marcus Kane became the first human in galactic history to adopt a Vorthak. The fact that he lived to tell about it is still considered a minor miracle by xenobiologists across the galaxy. Now, if you're thinking that caring for a baby apex predator might require some specialized knowledge, extensive research, or at least a basic understanding of xenobiology, then you clearly don't understand how humans operate. Marcus's approach to raising a Vorthak cub was essentially the same as raising any other pet, except with significantly more potential for dismemberment. "Oscar, do we have any milk substitute in the stores?" Marcus asked, cradling the cub as it made those heartbreaking little noises that somehow bypassed every logical brain function. "We have emergency protein gel that tastes like recycled despair," Oscar replied. "But Marcus, I feel compelled to point out that you're trying to feed a creature whose natural diet consists of things that scream when eaten." "It's a baby, Oscar. Babies drink milk. Basic biology." Marcus was already mixing the protein gel with water, creating a concoction that looked like it belonged in a hazmat container. The cub took to the makeshift formula like it was ambrosia. Within hours it had perked up considerably, and Marcus had already committed the first of many acts that would later be studied by xenopsychologists as humans and their inexplicable ability to befriend anything with a face. He named it Buttons. "Buttons?" Oscar's voice had reached new heights of electronic exasperation. "You named an apex predator Buttons?" "Look at its little nose," Marcus said, gently booping the aforementioned nose. "It's like a little black button, hence Buttons." "Marcus, that little black button is a scent receptor, capable of tracking prey across 3 star systems. You're essentially cooing at biological warfare." But Marcus was already lost in the human delusion that had conquered half the galaxy through sheer, inexplicable stubbornness. He fashioned toys out of spare parts, created a makeshift bed from old cargo padding, and began talking to Buttons in that particular tone humans reserve for things they find adorable. "Who's a good apex predator? Yes, you are. Yes, you are." The truly terrifying part wasn't that Marcus was treating a future galactic terror like a household pet. The truly terrifying part was that it was working. Buttons began following Marcus around the ship, making contented purring sounds that, according to xenobiological records, Vorthax only made when they were perfectly, utterly happy. "Marcus," Oscar said one morning, "I've been analyzing Button's behavior patterns, and I have some disturbing news." "What kind of disturbing?" Marcus asked, scratching behind Button's ears, while the cub made those rumbling purr sounds that could probably be heard 3 decks away. "The kind where your adopted death machine is imprinting on you as a parental figure rather than recognizing you as a potential food source." Marcus paused, his ear scratching. "That's disturbing?" "For the rest of the galaxy, yes. Do you have any idea what a fully grown Vorthak with human-level emotional attachment is capable of?" Marcus looked down at Buttons, who had rolled over to expose its belly for scratches. "Probably the same thing any loyal pet is capable of. Unconditional love and protection." "Marcus, when a regular pet protects its owner, the worst that happens is someone gets bitten. When a Vorthak protects its owner, entire fleets go missing." But Marcus was already lost in the simple joy of belly rubs, completely oblivious to the fact that he was creating what would later be classified as the galaxy's most dangerous friendship. 2 years later, Marcus learned the hard way that the phrase "they grow up so fast" takes on a whole new meaning when applied to apex predators. Buttons had gone from adorable furry ball to something roughly the size of a small shuttle, with claws that could open tin cans or hull plating with equal ease. The really disturbing part? Buttons still thought it was a lap pet. "Buttons, buddy, you're crushing my ribs," Marcus wheezed from underneath 200 pounds of affectionate death machine. Buttons responded by purring louder, which created a sound somewhere between a subspace engine and a minor earthquake. "I have calculated the probability of your survival if this continues," Oscar announced cheerfully. "It's not encouraging." Marcus had adapted to his new reality with the same casual acceptance that had gotten him into this situation in the first place. He'd reinforced the ship's deck plating, upgraded the environmental systems to handle the smell of wet Vorthak, and learned to sleep with one eye open because Buttons had developed a habit of wanting to cuddle at 3 in the morning. "Marcus," Oscar said one day, "we have a problem. A big, fleet-sized problem." "What kind of fleet?" Marcus asked, trying to convince Buttons that the ship's controls were not, in fact, a toy. "The kind belonging to Admiral Crix of the Zinthari Empire. He's been tracking what he calls the human Vortak incident for the past 6 months. Admiral Crix was what happened when you took military paranoia, gave it a uniform, and pointed it at anything that might threaten galactic stability. He'd built his entire career on the principle that if something seemed dangerous, it probably was, and if it seemed harmless, it was definitely hiding something worse. The idea of a human successfully domesticating a Vorthak had kept him awake for weeks, not because he was impressed, but because he was terrified. In his experience, when humans did something that should have been impossible, it usually meant they were about to accidentally reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. "He's demanding we submit to inspection," Oscar continued. "Apparently our little family here has attracted some attention." Marcus looked at Buttons, who was currently trying to figure out why the emergency alarm kept making noise every time he yawned. "Attention? We're just living our lives." "Marcus, you have successfully trained an apex predator to fetch your tools, guard your ship, and apparently do something that vaguely resembles sitting on command. The Xenobiology Department on Centauri Prime has declared you either a genius or a time bomb. Can't I be both?" What Marcus didn't know was that word of his pet had spread through the galactic community like wildfire. Some species were fascinated, others were terrified. Most were placing bets on how long it would take for Buttons to remember its natural instincts and turn Marcus into a light snack. The Zenthari were not betting, they were mobilizing. "Admiral," his aide said, "the human ship is still in the Kepler system. Our scouts report that the Vorthak appears to be playing." Admiral Crix's 4 eyes narrowed. "Playing?" "Yes, sir. With what appears to be a modified cargo container. It's fetching." "A Vorthak is fetching!" Admiral Crix felt something in his brain twitch. Ready the fleet. If the humans have found a way to turn apex predators into pets, we need to understand how before they decide to do it with something worse. Meanwhile, Marcus was completely oblivious to the fact that he'd become the subject of galactic military intelligence. He was too busy trying to teach Buttons not to accidentally destroy the ship every time it got excited. The arrival of Admiral Crix's fleet was announced by the kind of sensor readings that usually meant either first contact or imminent death. 12 Zenthari battlecruisers dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons systems powered up and ready to turn Marcus's humble salvage ship into its component atoms. "Marcus," Oscar said with the calm that comes from accepting inevitable doom, "we have visitors. The shoot first, ask questions later kind." Marcus looked up from where he was playing tug-of-war with Buttons, using a plasma coupling that probably cost more than his ship. "Visitors? We don't get visitors." "We do now. Zenthari battle fleet, Admiral Crix commanding, and they're hailing us with what I can only describe as aggressive diplomatic concern." The view screen crackled to life, revealing Admiral Crix in all his four-eyed, tentacle-bearded glory. He looked like someone had taken the concept of military authority and given it too much coffee and not enough sleep. "Human vessel, this is Admiral Crix of the Zenthari Defense Force. You are harboring a Class 12 galactic threat. Surrender the creature immediately or we will be forced to neutralize it." Marcus blinked. "Neutralize what now?" "The Vorthak, human. The apex predator that should have consumed you weeks ago. Our xenobiologists have classified it as an extinction-level threat to galactic stability." Marcus looked at Buttons, who was currently upside down trying to scratch an itch with his back leg, looking about as threatening as a particularly large houseplant. "You mean Buttons?" "Buttons?" Admiral Crix's voice rose an octave. "You named an apex predator Buttons?" "Well, yeah, look at his nose, it's like a little—" "I don't care about its nose," Admiral Crix bellowed. "That creature is a weapon of mass destruction with teeth. It needs to be contained, studied, and quite possibly eliminated before it develops a taste for sentient species." This was the moment when Marcus made his second catastrophic error in judgment. The first had been adopting Buttons. The second was getting defensive about his pet. "Hey now, there's no need to talk about eliminating anybody. Buttons wouldn't hurt a fly. Buttons is a Vorthak. Vorthaks don't discriminate between flies and battle cruisers when they're hungry." "Well, sure, but Buttons isn't wild. He's domesticated. Watch this." Marcus turned to Buttons, who had righted himself and was now watching the view screen with curious interest. "Buttons, sit." Buttons sat, all 200 pounds of apex predator settled onto his haunches with the obedience of a well-trained dog. The silence from the Zenthari fleet was deafening. "New shake," Marcus continued, and Buttons lifted one massive paw. Admiral Crix's aide leaned over and whispered, "Sir, our threat assessment computers just crashed." "Can also fetch, roll over, and play dead," Marcus added proudly. "Though we're still working on stay, because he gets separation anxiety." "Separation anxiety," Admiral Crix repeated slowly. "The apex predator gets separation anxiety. Yeah, if I'm gone too long he howls. It's actually pretty cute, except it can crack viewport glass." That's when Admiral Crix made his own catastrophic error. He decided that a demonstration was in order. If the human wouldn't surrender the creature voluntarily, perhaps a show of force would convince him. "Human, you have 10 seconds to step away from that creature before we open fire." Marcus stepped protectively in front of Buttons. "You're not shooting my pet. Your pet is a galactic threat level." Admiral Crix never finished that sentence, because the moment he ordered his gunners to target the human ship, Buttons stopped being a cuddly pet and remembered exactly what he was. The transformation was instantaneous and absolutely terrifying. One moment, Buttons was sitting obediently like a well-behaved dog. The next, he was every inch the apex predator his species was designed to be. He rose to his full height, his fur standing on end, and released a roar that made the ship's hull vibrate. But here's the thing that made Admiral Crix's blood run cold. Buttons wasn't roaring at Marcus. He was roaring at the fleet that had just threatened his human. "Oh," Marcus said, suddenly understanding. "Oh, you guys really shouldn't have done that." What happened next entered military history as the Buttons incident, though most official records just listed as inexplicable tactical failure. Buttons didn't attack the fleet directly. He didn't have to. He simply positioned himself between Marcus and the Zenthari ships, and somehow every targeting system on every ship in the fleet simultaneously malfunctioned. Later analysis would suggest that Buttons had somehow learned to emit a low-frequency pulse that interfered with Zenthari electronics. But Marcus had a simpler explanation. Buttons was protecting his pack, and Buttons was very, very good at his job. "Admiral," Marcus said conversationally, "I think we need to talk." What followed was the most awkward diplomatic meeting in galactic history. Admiral Crix, his pride and his fleet's targeting systems equally damaged, agreed to come aboard Marcus's ship for what the official records would later call informal negotiations. In reality, it was one confused human explaining pet ownership to a military leader whose entire worldview had just been drop-kicked into next week. "Let me get this straight," Admiral Crix said, sitting rigidly in Marcus's makeshift conference room while Buttons lounged nearby, occasionally making contented rumbling sounds. "You found an abandoned Vorthak cub and decided to adopt it." "Pretty much, yeah." Marcus was scratching behind Button's ears, which produced a purr that made the Admiral's tea vibrate in its cup. "Oscar thought I was crazy, but honestly, look at him. He's basically just a really big dog." "A really big dog," Admiral Crix repeated slowly, "that can disable military-grade electronics with its emotions." "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds weird." Admiral Crix's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "How else would I put it? Look, Admiral. Can I call you Admiral? Here's the thing about humans that I don't think you understand. We don't see threats. We see potential friends. Buttons here wasn't trying to hurt anybody. He was just protecting his family. His family being you. His family being me, Oscar, and anyone else who shows him kindness. It's not complicated. You treat someone with respect and care, they return it. Universal law." Admiral Crix leaned forward. "Universal law? Human, I have studied 17 different species of apex predators. None of them respond to kindness. They respond to strength, fear, and the biological imperative to survive." Marcus shrugged. "Maybe you weren't being kind enough." This was the moment when Admiral Crix realized he was dealing with something far more dangerous than an apex predator. He was dealing with human logic, which operated on principles that made sense only to humans and somehow worked anyway. "You're telling me," the Admiral said carefully, "that your entire approach to domesticating a galactic threat was being nice to it? I fed him, gave him toys, talked to him, played with him. Basic stuff. Turns out most living things respond well to not being treated like monsters. But he is a monster. Vorthaks are bred killers. They're living weapons. Buttons isn't a weapon. He's a person. A furry, slightly oversized person who happens to be really good at protecting the people he cares about." Admiral Crix felt something in his brain break a little. "You consider it a person?" "Of course he's a person. He has feelings, preferences, a personality. He likes his belly rubbed, he hates vacuum cleaners, and he gets excited when I come home. That's not a weapon, that's a friend. A friend who can apparently neutralize military fleets." Marcus looked thoughtful. "You know, I've been wondering about that. Oscar, show the Admiral the surveillance footage from the Kepler station incident." The view screen flickered to life, showing grainy security footage of what appeared to be a pirate raid on a civilian outpost. The timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks ago. "This is a Rigelian pirate attack on a mining station," Marcus explained. 12 families lived there. Watch what happens at timestamp 1432. The footage showed the pirates advancing on the station's main habitat when suddenly something massive and furry erupted from the shadows. The pirates barely had time to scream before Buttons was among them, moving with a speed and precision that made Admiral Crix's blood run cold. But he wasn't killing them. He was systematically destroying their weapons, their ships, their equipment, while carefully avoiding lethal force. "He's been doing this for months," Marcus continued. "Whenever we dock somewhere, he disappears for a few hours. I thought he was just exploring. Turns out, he's been protecting human settlements from actual threats." Admiral Crix stared at the screen. "How did you know to look for this?" "I didn't. The miner sent me a thank you message, said a guardian angel had saved them from pirates. Description matched Buttons, so I pulled the security footage." "You're telling me that your pet has been conducting freelance security operations across 3 sectors. "I'm telling you that my friend has been protecting people who needed protecting, without being asked, without expecting payment, just because it was the right thing to do." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "And you think this is because you were kind to him?" "I think it's because kindness is contagious. You show someone that the universe doesn't have to be a cold, hostile place, and they start making it warmer for everyone else." Admiral Crix looked at Buttons, who was now playfully batting at a spare power coupling like it was a cat toy. "This is impossible. Apex predators don't develop altruistic behavior patterns." Maybe they do when someone shows them there's another way to live. You're suggesting that the solution to galactic violence is adoption? Marcus grinned. I'm suggesting that the solution to galactic violence is treating people like people instead of treating them like the worst thing they could possibly be. Admiral Crick stood up slowly. Human, do you have any idea what you've done? Made a friend. You've proven that the most dangerous species in the galaxy can be turned into protectors through nothing more than basic decency. Do you understand what that means? Marcus looked thoughtful. That maybe we should try being decent to more species? Torture means, human. That everything we thought we knew about power, about control, about survival, might be wrong. And if you're right, if kindness really is that powerful, then maybe the galaxy doesn't have to be as scary as we thought it was. Admiral Crix looked at Buttons one more time, then at Marcus. I need to make some calls. 5 years later, the story of Marcus Kane and Buttons had become the kind of legend that parents told their children when they wanted to explain why being kind to others mattered. Except in this case, the legend was absolutely true, which made it both more inspiring and significantly more terrifying. The official galactic records listed it as the Kane Protocol, a diplomatic approach based on the radical concept of treating potentially hostile species as individuals rather than threats. The unofficial records called it, "That time a human accidentally solved galactic politics with a pet." Marcus, of course, remained blissfully unaware of his legendary status. He was too busy dealing with the consequences of his fame, which included a steady stream of visitors, researchers, and what he generously called well-meaning idiots. "Oscar," Marcus said, watching through the viewport as another research vessel approached their position. "Is that the xenobiology team from Andromeda University?" "That's the third one this week," Oscar replied. "They want to study your domestication techniques. I believe their exact words were, revolutionary interspecies bonding methodologies. I fed him and was nice to him. That's not a methodology, that's just not being a jerk." But the galaxy had latched onto Marcus's success with the desperation of species who had spent centuries assuming that violence was the only universal language. The results were mixed. Dr. Vexani of the Crystalline Collective had attempted to recreate Marcus's approach with a pack of Shadowhounds from the Vega system. The Shadowhounds had indeed bonded with him, but only after consuming his research team and declaring him their new pack leader. Dr. Vexani now ruled a small moon as a benevolent dictator, which wasn't quite what he'd intended, but was apparently working out well for everyone involved. The Regelian Commerce Guild had tried to apply the Kane Protocol to their ongoing dispute with the Asteroid Miners Union. The miners had been so touched by this unprecedented display of corporate kindness that they'd given up their strike and returned to work. The guild was still trying to figure out what to do with all the goodwill, having never encountered it before. Most spectacularly, the Zenthari military had attempted to domesticate a void kraken using Marcus's techniques. The operation had lasted exactly 17 minutes before the Kraken had adopted the entire research station, declared itself their protective deity, and begun offering unsolicited life advice to anyone who would listen. The problem, Marcus explained to yet another delegation of concerned officials, is that you're treating kindness like a weapon. It's not a tactic. It's just how you should treat people. Ambassador Cleeth of the Galactic Council fluttered her wings nervously. But surely there must be some systematic approach, some reproducible methodology. "Be nice to people," Marcus interrupted. "That's the methodology. If someone's hungry, feed them. If they're scared, comfort them. If they're lonely, spend time with them. It's not complicated." But what about security protocols? Risk assessments? Threat evaluation matrices? Marcus gestured to where Buttons was currently sprawled across 3 chairs, snoring with a sound like a malfunctioning hyperdrive. "Does he look like a threat to you?" The ambassador looked at the sleeping apex predator, then at the small crowd of children from the nearby station, who were using him as a jungle gym. Buttons had cracked one eye open to make sure they were safe, then gone back to sleep. "This is highly irregular," she muttered. Yeah, well, regular wasn't working out so great for anybody. The real test of Marcus's approach came when the hegemony of Sorrow, a species so aggressively hostile that they'd been banned from most of the galaxy, sent an envoy to meet with him. The envoy, a being called Draktor the Merciless, had expected to find a human weapon master who had bent an apex predator to his will. Instead, he found Marcus teaching Buttons to play fetch with a cargo container. "This is the human weapon master?" Draktor asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "I'm not a weapon master," Marcus replied, scratching behind Button's ears. I'm a salvage operator with a pet. Who are you? I am Draktor the Merciless, Herald of... That's a really long title. Can I call you Drak? You want some coffee? You look tired. The conversation that followed would later be studied by diplomats across the galaxy as an example of how to accidentally negotiate a peace treaty while discussing beverage preferences. Draktor left 3 hours later with a thermos of Marcus's coffee, a new perspective on interspecies relations, and a standing invitation to visit anytime. 6 months later, the Hegemony of Sorrow renamed themselves the Collective of Constructive Discourse and opened their first diplomatic embassy in 2 centuries. But the most telling moment came when a young Zenthari cadet asked Marcus the question that had been bothering military strategists across the galaxy. Sir, what's your secret? How do you make friends with things that should want to kill you? Marcus thought about it for a moment, then smiled. I don't make friends with things that want to kill me. I make friends with people who have been told their whole lives that they are supposed to be killers. There's a difference. The cadet looked confused. But sir, how do you know they won't hurt you? I don't, but I also don't know that they will. So I choose to assume the best about people until they prove me wrong. Turns out most people live up to your expectations, whether they're good or bad. Today, Marcus, Kane, and Buttons can be found traveling the galaxy in their upgraded ship, the Optimistic Fool, responding to calls for help from species who have heard about the human who treats everyone like family. Buttons, now fully grown, serves as both protector and ambassador, proving daily that even the most dangerous creatures can choose to be gentle. The galaxy is still whispering about it. The difference is, now they're whispering with hope instead of fear. Admiral Crix, incidentally, retired from the military and now runs a very successful interspecies mediation service. His motto, emblazoned on his business cards, reads, "Try being nice first. It's cheaper than orbital bombardment." And sometimes, late at night when the ship is quiet and the stars are bright, Marcus looks at Buttons sleeping peacefully beside him and wonders if maybe, just maybe, the universe is exactly as kind as you expect it to be. The galaxy is still whispering about that too.